Here's a Steiger Lion 1000. Looks like a case, doesn't it? It's pretty massive. Cougar 2. Look at this guy. Turbo. Here's a Panther CE 1325 duals. $1983. Here's a Steiger Panther PTA 325. $34.06 cat in there.
I'm MaJeana Steiger Hallstrom, and I'm Doug Steiger's daughter. I grew up on the farm where the Steiger tractors were first built. I was about a year and a half old when the first tractor was built. The story is, as most people know, that my dad and my grandpa and my uncle needed a bigger tractor so that they could do more work with just 3 people. So they went to the bank. Well, they had looked at Wagner's first. And the Wagners were like $24,000, and they decided, you know, we think we can build one ourselves for like $10,000. So they actually got it built in about less than a year, over the winter of 57, 58, came out of the barn in the spring of 58 and was used for a long time. It had about 10,000 hours on it. My grandpa was the main driver of that tractor. He did the plowing with it. And we called it Grandpa's tractor. That was always his tractor. And I still remember we lived on the main farm and we heard our grandpa going by in the tractor because the field was just right outside my bedroom window.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the early story. And of course, they sold the business in, well, I must step back. So they built 4 tractors out of used parts. And in 1963, a dealer by the name of Earl Christensen approached my dad and uncle and said, you know, if you'll build tractors out of new parts, I'll sell them for you. And so my dad and uncle said, well, what would we call them? Steiger. So they named them Steiger tractors. They started building them in the summer and fall and winter of '63. And the very first, let's call it the production tractor, came out in about December of 1963, and that's what this tractor is. By the way, we have this tractor on display in Rolog, Minnesota, the number 1 2200. So they did the business, the tractor business, but they were still farmers, and eventually they were farming about 5,000 acres, and so there was a lot going on for 3 guys to run a company. So they sold it out to some investors and moved the company to Fargo. My dad and uncle were still still had shares in the new company, but as some of the economy issues went on, their shares were diluted, to say the least. But my dad stayed on the board until 1986, when Tenneco bought out Steiger Tractor, the Fargo plant. So that's kind of the main story.
And then how did Case get involved in there?
Well, Case IH was also owned by Tenneco, so that's how they became part of it. And if you read this book, or even that red 4-wheel drive
Yes, I'm sure he would be.
So.
All right. Well, thank you for your story. Okay, so you just seen MaJeana talk about her story, and if you get this book, this is one I got at the show. It has it's all about Steiger, obviously, but here's her and her father, and there's some interesting things in here. Arizona Proving Grounds, Steiger timeline, and the part that's cool, really cool, is here's where they teamed up with Case, and it also shows you the other models that they made for other companies, including Ford, Co-op, Hallstrom, IH. So here's one they made for International. It was the 4166. And there's a story in each one about how they developed it and stuff. Alice Chalmers. They made one for Alice Chalmers. It was the 440. And it was a Series 1 Bearcat. And the Steiger equivalent. Canadian Co-op. The Ford FW series was a Steiger. So the Ford FWs were models based on but not identical to standard chassis Series 3 Bearcat, Cougar, and Panther tractors, which were built at Fargo to Ford specs. There's the International one. They had, looks like 4 of them. Raba, Vandal, Titan, Zanello SA. So they made a lot of different tractors for different companies. So they were very influential in the industry. Now I'm going to include some of the Steiger plowing videos from the Half Century show at the end of the video here, which you can also see in the one with the earthquake. For more information on Steiger tractors, go to www.steigerheritageclub.com, where you will find everything from history, news, and events to owner stories and much more. Link is in the description below.